The forest had been swallowing secrets for 60 years, but on that cold October morning it was about to give one back. A thin layer of fog drifted between the towering pine trees outside Ashwood, Oregon, turning the narrow trail into a tunnel of pale silver. Naomi Carter pedaled her delivery bike through the mist, the small cargo crate strapped behind her, rattling softly over roots and loose gravel. The air smelled of wet earth and pine needles. Her breath floated in front of her face in small clouds. At 24 years old, Naomi knew every shortcut through these woods. She had to. Delivering groceries and supplies to remote cabins barely paid enough to cover rent, and every extra mile meant less money left at the end of the week. Her faded brown jacket did little against the cold, but she kept moving. The sun had risen nearly an hour ago, yet the deeper parts of the forest still looked trapped in twilight. The silence felt different today, not peaceful, not threatening, just strange. The birds were missing. Usually she heard them everywhere. Sparrows, jays, woodpeckers tapping against old bark. Today there was nothing except the crunch of her tires and the distant whisper of wind moving through branches. Naomi glanced around. The fog seemed thicker ahead. She checked the delivery slip tucked into her pocket. One final package remained. A small box of medicine headed to an old hunting cabin less than a mile away. After that, she could finally head home. Unfortunately for her, she never reached the cabin. A sudden metallic sound echoed somewhere deeper among the trees. Naomi squeezed the brakes. The bike rolled to a stop. She listened. The sound came again, soft, almost musical, like a bell moving in the wind. She frowned. There were no churches out here, no houses either, just miles of forest. Most people would have ignored it. Naomi should have ignored it. But curiosity had always been her greatest weakness. She pushed the bike off the trail and followed the sound. Branches brushed against her sleeves as she moved between the trees. The fog grew denser. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The bell-like sound became clearer. Not louder, just closer. Ahead, the forest suddenly opened into a clearing she had never seen before. Naomi stopped walking. Her heart skipped. An old stone structure stood in the center of the clearing. It looked like a chapel, though time had nearly erased it. Ivy covered the walls. Thick roots crawled across the weathered stone. Part of the roof had collapsed decades ago, yet somehow the building remained standing. The bell tower rose above the trees like a forgotten monument. Naomi stared in disbelief. She had spent years riding through these woods. How had she never found this place? A cold breeze drifted through the clearing. The bell chimed again. This time she realized something strange. There was no bell moving, no rope, no mechanism. Yet the sound continued, soft, rhythmic, almost alive. What she didn't know was that less than 5 miles away, alarms had begun ringing inside a hidden estate buried beneath the mountains. Men who had not panicked in centuries were suddenly abandoning meetings and rushing through ancient corridors. But Naomi knew nothing about that. She only saw the ruined chapel and the half-open doorway waiting in silence. Slowly she stepped inside. Dust floated through beams of pale light that pierced the broken roof. Moss covered the stone floor. Vines hung from cracked arches. The entire place felt frozen in time. Then she saw him. At the far end of the chapel stood a raised platform surrounded by roots thicker than tree trunks. At first Naomi thought it was a statue. It had to be. No person could remain perfectly still for that long, but as she moved closer, her pulse quickened. It wasn't a statue, it was a young man. He appeared to be about 20 years old. Dark hair rested against his shoulders. His skin was impossibly pale. He wore clothes unlike anything she had ever seen, black fabric embroidered with silver patterns that looked centuries old. He lay upon a stone bed wrapped in roots and ivy as though the forest itself had grown around him. Naomi swallowed hard. Every instinct told her to leave, yet she couldn't move. The young man looked peaceful, not injured, not unconscious, simply asleep, as if he had closed his eyes moments ago instead of years. Then something caught her attention. A single golden leaf drifted through the broken ceiling and landed gently on his hand. The moment it touched his skin, it crumbled. Naomi stared. The air suddenly felt colder. She stepped closer without realizing it. One step, then another. Her shoes scraped softly against stone. The sleeping stranger never moved. The strange bell echoed again somewhere above. Naomi found herself kneeling beside the stone bed, close enough to see individual strands of dark hair, close enough to notice that despite the cold air, there wasn't a single trace of frost on his skin. Her hand slowly reached forward, not to wake him, not even to touch him, just to make sure he was real. Then she noticed something that made her breath catch. Beneath the silence of the ruined chapel, beneath the whisper of wind and the distant bell, faint, slow, impossible, a heartbeat. And at that exact moment, for the first time in 60 years, the sleeping prince's fingers twitched. The heartbeat came again. Slow, deep, impossible. Naomi froze beside the stone bed, her eyes fixed on the young man's hand. For a moment she wondered if she had imagined it. The ruined chapel was old enough to play tricks on the mind. Wind moved through broken arches, leaves scraped softly across stone. Maybe that was all she had heard. Then his fingers moved again, just slightly, a faint twitch beneath the silver embroidery resting across his wrist. Naomi immediately pulled back. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. Every rational thought told her to leave. People did not sleep inside abandoned chapels hidden in forests. People definitely did not remain untouched by time while roots wrapped around them like living guardians. Yet the stranger looked exactly as he had moments earlier, peaceful, motionless, almost unreal. The strange bell echoed once more through the chapel. This time the sound felt closer. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Naomi stood and slowly stepped backward. One step, then another. She never made it to the doorway. A shadow crossed the broken ceiling above. The sunlight vanished. The entire chapel fell into silence. Even the wind stopped. Naomi turned toward the entrance. A man stood there. She had not heard footsteps. She had not heard a door open. 1 second the doorway had been empty. The next second he was simply there, tall, still, dressed in a black coat that reached nearly to his knees. Dark hair framed a face so sharp and composed it almost looked carved from stone. His skin appeared unusually pale against the grey light filtering through the ruins. But it was his eyes that stopped Naomi completely. They were calm, cold, focused entirely on her. Not angry, not welcoming, just watching, measuring, waiting. Neither of them spoke. The silence stretched across the chapel. Naomi became painfully aware of every sound she made, every breath, every movement. The stranger's attention shifted briefly toward the stone bed behind her, then back to her face. "Step away from him," he said quietly. His voice was smooth and controlled, not loud, yet somehow it filled the entire room. Naomi immediately obeyed. She moved several feet from the sleeping young man. "Who is he?" she asked. The stranger did not answer right away. Instead, he walked forward with deliberate steps. His shoes barely made a sound against the stone floor. As he approached the platform, something strange happened. The roots surrounding the stone bed seemed to loosen, not much. Just enough for Naomi to wonder whether she had imagined that too. The man's gaze remained fixed on the sleeping figure. For the first time, Naomi noticed something hidden beneath his calm expression. Relief. It appeared for only a fraction of a second before disappearing again. "You should not be here," he said. Naomi folded her arms against the cold. "I could say the same thing." To her surprise, the corner of his mouth almost moved. Not quite a smile. Something close to one. Then his attention shifted toward the prince's hand, the same hand that had moved moments earlier. The stranger knelt beside the stone bed. His expression became unreadable. He carefully placed 2 fingers near the sleeping young man's wrist. Several seconds passed. Naomi watched the smallest change appear in his eyes. Not fear, not confusion, hope. Whatever he felt, he immediately concealed it. Unfortunately for Naomi, she did not notice the deeper significance of that moment. She did not know that for 60 years, hundreds of scholars, physicians, and caretakers had stood exactly where she stood now. None of them had witnessed even the slightest change. None of them had ever seen the sleeping prince respond. The stranger slowly rose to his feet. "Tell me exactly what happened when you arrived." Naomi hesitated before explaining everything. The bell, the chapel, the golden leaf, the heartbeat, the movement of the prince's fingers. The man listened without interruption. When she finished, the silence returned once again. Then his eyes narrowed slightly, not at her, at something behind her. Naomi turned. The roots surrounding the stone bed were moving, very slowly, almost imperceptibly, but they were moving. And for the first time in 60 years, the sleeping prince drew a deeper breath. The roots stopped moving as suddenly as they had begun. Silence settled over the ruined chapel once more, heavy and unnatural. Naomi stared at the sleeping prince, trying to convince herself she had not imagined any of it. The deeper breath, the twitching fingers, the shifting roots, every explanation her mind offered felt weaker than the last. The dark-haired stranger remained beside the stone bed, as though he were afraid to look away. Several seconds passed before he finally spoke. "Did you touch him?" Naomi hesitated, only for a moment. The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Where?" "His hand." The answer seemed to matter far more than she expected. A strange look crossed his face, not anger, not surprise, something closer to disbelief. He slowly turned toward her. The grey light filtering through the broken ceiling revealed details Naomi had missed before. The man looked younger than she first thought, early 30s perhaps, yet there was something timeless about him, something that did not fit the modern world outside these woods. "What is your name?" he asked. "Naomi Carter," he repeated it quietly, as if committing it to memory. Naomi. Hearing her name spoken in that calm voice felt oddly unsettling. "Who are you?" she asked. This time he answered. "Sebastian Romano." The name sounded familiar somehow, though Naomi could not place it. Before she could ask another question, a sudden gust of wind swept through the chapel. Dust spiraled through shafts of pale sunlight. The bell rang again, louder now. Sebastian immediately looked upward toward the shattered bell tower. His expression sharpened. Whatever calm he had maintained until now seemed to crack slightly. Naomi noticed it. "What is wrong?" she asked. Sebastian did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped toward one of the chapel windows where ivy-covered stone framed the forest beyond. His gaze scanned the trees, listening, watching, waiting. She had no way of knowing that the bell had not sounded once during the previous 60 years. Not once. Yet it had now rung 4 separate times since her arrival. Deep beneath the mountains, ancient systems older than most cities in America had begun responding. Doors were opening, messages were being sent, people were moving. The entire hidden world surrounding Sebastian Romano was awakening. Back inside the chapel, Naomi folded her arms against the cold. "You keep looking at him like you know him." Sebastian finally turned back toward the stone bed. The sleeping prince looked exactly the same as before. Peaceful, motionless, frozen somewhere between life and dream. "I do know him," Sebastian said quietly. "Then who is he?" For a moment Naomi thought he might refuse to answer. Instead his gaze lingered on the young man's face. "Someone I have been trying to save for a very long time." The answer only created more questions. Naomi opened her mouth to ask another one when a faint sound interrupted her, a heartbeat. Stronger this time, she heard it clearly. So did Sebastian. Both of them looked toward the prince. Thump, slow, steady, real. Naomi's pulse accelerated. The sound seemed impossible inside the silent chapel. Then something even stranger happened. Thin cracks of silver light appeared beneath the roots surrounding the stone bed. Not bright, not dramatic, just enough to glow softly through the tangled wood. Sebastian took a single step forward. Hope flashed across his face before disappearing again. "That should not be happening," he whispered. Naomi heard him. "What does that mean?" she asked. Before he could answer, the prince's hand moved again. His fingers slowly curled against the stone surface. The silver light beneath the roots brightened. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Somewhere above, the bell began ringing continuously, one chime after another, slow, rhythmic, ancient. Naomi stared at the sleeping prince. Sebastian stared too. Neither of them noticed the faint symbol beginning to appear beneath a layer of dust on the stone floor, directly beneath Naomi's feet. And neither of them realized that the symbol was glowing brighter with every beat of the prince's awakening heart. Naomi did not notice the symbol beneath her feet until the silver glow touched the edge of her boot. She instinctively stepped back and looked down. Dust shifted across the ancient stone floor as delicate lines emerged from beneath decades of dirt and neglect. The design spread outward in a perfect circle nearly 10 feet wide, carved directly into the chapel foundation. At its center stood a crest unlike anything she had ever seen. Intertwined branches surrounded a crown pierced by a single star. The symbol pulsed softly with the same rhythm as the heartbeat echoing through the chapel. Thump light, thump light. Naomi stared in disbelief. Sebastian. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. He followed her gaze. The moment he saw the symbol, all color seemed to drain from his already pale face. For the first time since she had met him, genuine surprise broke through his carefully controlled expression. He crossed the chapel floor immediately and stopped just outside the glowing circle. His eyes moved between the crest and Naomi as though trying to solve a puzzle that should not exist. "Do not move," he said quietly. Naomi immediately froze. "Why?" Sebastian did not answer right away. His attention remained fixed on the ancient markings. The silver glow continued spreading through cracks in the stone like streams of moonlight trapped beneath glass. Above them, the bell continued its slow rhythm. The entire chapel seemed alive now. The roots surrounding the stone bed no longer looked dormant. Tiny leaves were beginning to appear along their twisting surfaces despite the cold season outside. "This place should be dormant," he said. "It has been dormant for decades." Naomi glanced around. The ruined chapel suddenly felt much larger than before. Shadows shifted across the walls. Ancient carvings hidden beneath vines as more silver light filled the room. She noticed crowns, stars, trees with roots stretching toward the sky instead of the earth, symbols repeated everywhere. "What is this place?" she asked. Sebastian looked toward the ceiling, still clung to the broken frame above. Sunlight passed through the colored fragments, scattering faint shades of blue and gold across the floor. "It was once a royal sanctuary," Naomi blinked. "Royal?" "Long ago." His answer raised far more questions than it answered. Before she could ask another one, a low sound echoed through the chapel. Not a growl, not a voice, more like the creaking of ancient wood waking after a long winter. Both of them turned toward the far wall. Ivy that had covered the stone for decades was slowly peeling away. Piece by piece, layer by layer, something hidden beneath the vines was being revealed. Naomi moved closer despite Sebastian's warning. A massive mural emerged across the wall. Time had faded much of the paint, but enough remained to make out the image. Dozens of figures stood beneath a silver sky. At the center was a young prince wearing dark ceremonial clothing. Beside him stood a king. Even after centuries of damage, the sleeping young man on the stone bed, the man standing beside her. Naomi looked from the mural to Sebastian and back again. The same dark hair, the same features, the same eyes. Understanding began forming inside her mind. "You know him because..." She stopped speaking. Sebastian remained silent. The answer was already there. Unfortunately for Naomi, the most important detail was still missing. She had discovered a connection, not the truth. Her attention drifted toward another section of the mural. A young woman stood beside the prince. Unlike the others, her face had been preserved almost perfectly. She wore simple clothing rather than royal garments. One hand rested against the prince's shoulder. The other pointed toward a symbol identical to the glowing crest beneath Naomi's feet. Something about the woman's face felt strangely familiar. Naomi stepped closer. The resemblance was not exact, yet there was something in the eyes. Something in the shape of the smile, a distant echo. As if she were looking at someone she should recognize but could not place. Behind her, Sebastian had gone completely still. He was no longer looking at the mural. He was looking directly at Naomi. And for the first time he seemed less concerned about the prince awakening than he was about the impossible connection standing inside the circle. The silence inside the chapel felt different now. It was no longer the silence of an abandoned place. It was the silence of something waiting. Naomi stood before the ancient mural, unable to pull her eyes away from the painted woman. The resemblance continued bothering her. It was not enough to explain, not enough to understand, yet impossible to ignore. Dust drifted through pale light as the silver glow beneath the floor slowly brightened. Behind her, the steady heartbeat continued. Thump, light, thump, light. Each pulse seemed stronger than the last. Naomi turned away from the mural and looked toward the sleeping prince. The roots surrounding the stone bed no longer appeared lifeless. Tiny silver leaves had begun unfolding across their surfaces. They reflected the light like pieces of frozen moonlight. "Who was she?" Naomi asked quietly. Sebastian remained motionless for several seconds. His eyes lingered on the mural before shifting toward the prince. "Someone important," he answered. "That is not really an answer." The corner of his mouth tightened slightly. "No, it is not." Naomi folded her arms. The cold inside the chapel seemed to have faded. The air felt warmer now, alive somehow. "You keep giving me pieces of information and expecting me to ignore the rest." Sebastian finally looked directly at her. His expression remained calm, but there was something heavier beneath it now. Wariness. The kind that did not come from a long day or a sleepless night, the kind that took decades to accumulate. "You found a place that was never meant to be found," he said. "You entered a sanctuary that has slept for generations. Then you touched someone who should not have responded." He glanced toward the glowing symbol beneath her feet. "And now the sanctuary is responding to you." Naomi looked down at the crest. The silver lines seemed brighter than before, more detailed. New sections of the carving were becoming visible, as if the stone itself were remembering something forgotten. Around the outer ring, small symbols had appeared. Crowns, stars, trees, birds in flight. Ancient designs woven together into a story she could not read. "I still do not know what any of this means, neither do I." The answer surprised her. Sebastian stepped closer to the circle but remained outside its edge. "That is the problem." Naomi studied him carefully. Until now he had always appeared certain, controlled, like someone who understood every part of the situation. Hearing uncertainty in his voice changed something. For the first time, He seemed less like an untouchable stranger and more like someone carrying questions of his own. A distant rumble echoed through the forest outside. Not thunder, something lower, deeper. Sebastian immediately turned toward the broken entrance. His eyes narrowed. "What was that?" Naomi asked. Before he could answer, movement caught her attention, the mural. She looked back toward the painted wall and felt her breath catch. More images had emerged as the ivy continued peeling away. Entire sections previously hidden were now visible. The painted woman appeared again and again throughout the story, carved across the stone, standing beside the prince, standing beside the king, standing beneath the same symbol glowing beneath Naomi's feet. One image in particular drew her attention. The woman held her palm against the prince's chest while silver light flowed between them. Above them appeared a line of ancient writing. Naomi could not understand a single word. Yet something about the symbols felt oddly familiar, like a memory she could almost reach. Unfortunately for her, she was not the only one noticing the changes. Sebastian stared at the writing with an intensity she had not seen before. Recognition flashed across his face. Not complete understanding, recognition, as though he had spent years searching for something and had finally found the first piece. The heartbeat echoed again, stronger, deeper. Then the prince's hand slowly closed into a loose fist. This time neither of them could pretend it was accidental, and when Naomi looked down at the glowing crest beneath her feet, she realized a new word had appeared within the silver light. A single name. One she had never seen before. Yet, somehow, impossibly, she knew it belonged to her. The name glowed beneath the silver only a few seconds before fading back into the stone. Naomi dropped to one knee, brushing dust away with trembling fingers. The ancient carving remained, but the letters had vanished as though they had never existed. She stared at the empty surface. "You saw it too," she said. It was not a question. Sebastian remained silent for a moment. The heartbeat echoed through the chapel again. Thump, light, thump, light. The silver glow reflected across the ruined walls. "I saw it," he finally admitted. Naomi stood and turned toward him. "Then tell me what it means." Sebastian looked toward the mural instead of answering. His gaze settled on the painted woman standing beside the prince. The resemblance was becoming impossible to ignore now. The shape of the eyes, the curve of the jaw, the quiet strength hidden within the expression. Not identical, but connected somehow. "That name should not exist here," Sebastian said quietly. "Why?" "Because it disappeared a very long time ago." Naomi frowned. "You keep talking like all of this happened centuries ago." For the first time, Sebastian did not correct her. The silence itself became an answer. Before Naomi could process that realization, another change rippled through the chapel. The silver leaves growing across the roots surrounding the prince began unfolding further. Tiny veins of light spread through each leaf like flowing moonlight. The heartbeat grew stronger, no longer distant, no longer faint. It sounded almost normal now, as though someone sleeping peacefully rested only a few feet away. Naomi found herself moving closer to the stone bed again. The prince looked different. The grayness that had shadowed his skin was fading. Color had begun returning to his face. Not much, just enough to make him seem less like a statue and more like a living person. "He is changing," she whispered. Sebastian joined her beside the prince. Yes, there was something almost fragile in his voice. Hope, carefully hidden, carefully controlled. But there, unfortunately for Naomi, she still did not understand the true weight of what she was witnessing. Entire generations had lived and died while the prince slept. Empires had risen and fallen. Technology had transformed the world outside these woods. Yet inside the chapel, time had barely moved. And now, for reasons nobody understood, a sudden sound interrupted her thoughts. Stone grinding against stone. Both of them turned toward the far side of the sanctuary. The mural wall was moving, slowly, almost imperceptibly. A narrow opening appeared between two sections of ancient stone. Dust drifted into the air as hidden mechanisms awakened for the first time in decades. Naomi stared in disbelief. There is a room behind it. Sebastian's expression darkened with concentration. There should not be. The opening widened another few inches. Beyond it, darkness waited. Not empty darkness, purposeful darkness. The kind that concealed secrets. Naomi looked toward Sebastian. He was already studying the passage, listening, calculating. Then his gaze shifted unexpectedly back toward her. "Whatever opens inside that chamber may explain why the sanctuary recognized you." The words settled heavily between them. Recognized you. Not him, not the prince. Her. Naomi glanced down at the glowing crest beneath her feet. Questions crowded her mind faster than answers could arrive. Who was the woman in the mural? Why had the hidden name felt familiar? Why did the sanctuary respond whenever she approached? And why was Sebastian looking at her as though she had become the center of a mystery older than either of them could explain? The stone doorway finally stopped moving. The hidden chamber beyond lay completely exposed now. A faint silver light shimmered somewhere deep inside. The prince's heartbeat echoed once more through the chapel, stronger than ever before, and then from within the darkness of the newly revealed room, a second heartbeat answered. The second heartbeat echoed from somewhere beyond the hidden doorway, slow, steady, ancient. Naomi felt every hair on her arms rise. The sound did not belong to the prince resting on the stone bed behind her. It came from deeper within the sanctuary. From a place that should not have existed, the silver light spilling from the concealed chamber pulsed in perfect rhythm with both heartbeats. Sebastian remained completely still, his attention locked onto the darkness beyond the opening. For the first time since arriving at the chapel, he looked genuinely unsettled. "What is in there?" Naomi asked quietly. Sebastian exhaled slowly. "Something that was sealed long before I was born." The answer only deepened the mystery. Naomi stared at him. She remembered every impossible detail she had witnessed since entering the forest. The hidden chapel, the sleeping prince, the glowing symbol, the mural, the forgotten name. None of it felt real anymore. Yet all of it stood directly in front of her. The second heartbeat sounded again. Thump, the silver light brightened. Thump, dust drifted from the stone ceiling. Thump, the ancient doorway opened another inch by itself. Then the heartbeat stopped. Silence crashed over the chapel. Even the bell tower above went quiet. Naomi held her breath. Something had changed. She could feel it. Slowly, Sebastian stepped toward the hidden chamber. Naomi followed despite every instinct warning her not to. The narrow passage beyond the wall led into a circular room no larger than 20 feet across. Unlike the ruined sanctuary outside, this chamber appeared untouched by time. The stone walls remained smooth and pristine. Silver symbols covered every surface. Thousands of them. They shimmered softly beneath the mysterious light filling the room. At the center stood a pedestal carved from white stone. Resting atop it was a small metal box, no larger than a jewelry case. Its surface carried the same crest that glowed beneath Naomi's feet. Crown, star branches. The moment Naomi crossed the threshold, the box reacted. Thin lines of silver light spread across its surface. Sebastian immediately stopped walking. His eyes narrowed. Naomi looked at him. "You keep saying that." Neither of them noticed the prince's heartbeat growing stronger behind them. The box continued glowing. Slowly, almost gently, the lid unlocked by itself. A soft click echoed through the chamber. Naomi stared. "I did not touch it. I know." Sebastian's voice had become unusually quiet. The box opened. Inside rested a folded piece of parchment protected beneath crystal. The paper looked impossibly old, yet perfectly preserved, as though someone had placed it there yesterday. Naomi felt drawn toward it, not compelled, not controlled, simply curious in a way she could not explain. She carefully lifted the parchment from the box. The moment her fingers touched it, silver light surged across the chamber walls. Symbols awakened everywhere. The ancient writing illuminated around them like stars appearing in a night sky. Sebastian's eyes widened. Naomi unfolded the parchment. At first she saw only unfamiliar symbols. Then the letters began shifting, rearranging themselves, transforming into words she could suddenly understand. Her breath caught. There was only one sentence written on the page. One sentence preserved for decades, one sentence waiting specifically for her. "The keeper's blood shall return when the prince is ready to wake." Naomi read the words twice, then 3 times. Her pulse hammered in her chest. Keeper's blood. The phrase felt strangely familiar, like something buried deep within a forgotten memory. She looked up slowly. Sebastian was staring at her now, not at the parchment, not at the glowing chamber. At her, the pieces were finally beginning to connect. The woman in the mural, the hidden name, the sanctuary responding to her presence. The prince awakening after her arrival. None of it had been random. None of it had been coincidence. "Sebastian," Naomi whispered, "what is the keeper's blood?" For several seconds he said nothing. Then his gaze shifted toward the ancient mural visible through the open doorway, toward the painted woman whose face resembled Naomi's own. When he finally answered, his voice carried the weight of 60 years of unanswered questions. "It means the sanctuary did not choose you by accident." The heartbeat behind them suddenly thundered through the chapel louder than ever before, and somewhere inside the sleeping prince's sealed memories, something finally began to awaken. The words on the parchment seemed to linger in the air long after Naomi lowered the page. "The keeper's blood shall return when the prince is ready to wake." She read the sentence again, hoping it would somehow become less impossible. It did not. Around her, The hidden chamber continued glowing with silver light. Ancient symbols shimmered across the walls like reflections on moving water. The heartbeat echoing from the chapel beyond had become steady now, strong, alive. Sebastian stood quietly beside the pedestal, his attention fixed on the parchment in Naomi's hands. For the first time since she had met him, he looked less like a man guarding secrets and more like someone finally confronting them. Naomi carefully placed the parchment back into the crystal-lined box. "You said the sanctuary did not choose me by accident." Sebastian nodded once. "I did." The request hung between them. Outside the hidden chamber, the bell rang again, not urgently, almost gently. Sebastian exhaled and looked toward the mural beyond the doorway. The painted woman seemed different now, not because the image had changed, but because Naomi had. Every new piece of information pulled her closer to a truth she still could not fully see. "The woman in the mural was called Elara," Sebastian said quietly. "For generations her name survived only in fragments." Naomi glanced back toward the image. Who was she? The first keeper? The answer sent a chill through her. Sebastian stepped toward the mural. Silver light followed him across the floor. She was not royal, she was not powerful, she was simply trusted. His gaze settled on the painted prince. When a threat emerged that could not be defeated, she helped create a vow that protected this sanctuary. Naomi frowned. A vow? A promise stronger than law. His voice softened. Stronger than time. The heartbeat echoed again. Thump, light shimmered across the walls. Thump, dust drifted from the ceiling. Naomi looked between the mural and the prince resting beyond the chamber. Questions continued multiplying. If she was the first keeper, then why does the sanctuary think I belong here? Sebastian remained silent. That silence became its own answer. Naomi slowly turned toward the painted woman once more. The resemblance she had noticed earlier suddenly felt impossible to dismiss. Similar eyes, similar features, similar presence, not identical, connected. Her stomach tightened. "You think I am related to her?" Sebastian did not immediately answer. Instead, he walked toward another section of the mural where smaller carvings had become visible beneath the silver light. Family lines stretched across the stone like branches of a tree. Some names remained clear. Others had faded long ago. One section near the bottom appeared damaged. Time had erased most of it, yet a single symbol remained untouched. The same crest glowing throughout the sanctuary. "For decades we believed the keeper's bloodline disappeared," Sebastian said. He looked directly at her, until today. Naomi felt her pulse quicken. Every memory of her childhood suddenly seemed smaller, simpler. Ordinary, she had grown up believing she came from an unremarkable family. No ancient secrets. No hidden legacy. No connection to forgotten sanctuaries hidden beneath forests. Yet standing here, surrounded by impossible evidence, that certainty was beginning to crack. Unfortunately for both of them, the greatest revelation had not arrived yet. Deep within the chapel, the prince drew another breath, stronger than any before. The roots surrounding the stone bed slowly loosened. Silver leaves unfolded wider. Then, for the first time in 60 years, the prince's closed eyes moved beneath their lids as though he were dreaming. Sebastian turned instantly toward the sound. Hope flashed across his face. Naomi followed his gaze. Neither of them noticed a new line of silver text beginning to appear across the mural wall behind them. A message hidden for decades. A message that would finally explain why the prince had chosen to sleep at all. The silver words continued spreading across the mural long after the last heartbeat faded into silence. Naomi turned slowly, her eyes locking onto the glowing text appearing line by line across the ancient stone. Dust drifted through the air like falling snow. The chapel felt suspended between two worlds, one foot in the present, one buried deep inside history. Sebastian stepped closer to the mural, his expression hardened with concentration. Neither of them spoke as the final symbols revealed themselves. Then, gradually, the ancient language shifted. The same impossible transformation Naomi had witnessed inside the hidden chamber began again. The symbols rearranged themselves into words she could understand. Her breath caught as she read the first sentence. "The prince chose sleep so the forest could remain awake." Silence followed. Naomi read the words again, then a third time. They made no sense. "Chose sleep," she whispered. Sebastian remained motionless. The color had drained from his face. "No," he said quietly. That record was lost. Naomi looked at him. "You already knew he was sleeping." "Yes." His eyes never left the mural. "But we believed it was done to him." More silver letters appeared beneath the first line. The sanctuary answered with a soft pulse of light. "The prince surrendered 60 years so thousands could keep theirs." Naomi stared at the message. The pieces shifted inside her mind. Every assumption she had formed since entering the forest suddenly felt incomplete. The prince had not been trapped. He had not been cursed by an enemy. He had chosen to sleep, chosen to disappear from the world, chosen to remain alone for 6 decades. "Why?" she asked. The question echoed softly through the chapel. For a moment neither she nor Sebastian received an answer. Then another line appeared across the mural. "Because the seal required a living guardian." The heartbeat sounded again, strong, steady, almost normal now. Naomi slowly turned toward the stone bed. The prince's face looked peaceful, younger somehow, less distant, less frozen. The realization settled heavily in her chest. For 60 years he had not been waiting to be rescued. He had been protecting something. Unfortunately for Naomi, she still did not know what. The more words emerged from the stone, the keeper's blood would return when the burden could be shared. Naomi felt her pulse quicken. Shared, not removed, shared. Sebastian closed his eyes briefly. It looked less like relief and more like understanding. A question that had haunted him for decades was finally receiving an answer. The sanctuary was never trying to wake him, he said quietly. Naomi looked at him. Then what was it trying to do? His gaze shifted toward her. For the first time there was no uncertainty in his expression, only clarity. "It was waiting for you." The words settled between them, heavy, unavoidable. Naomi immediately looked away. Her attention drifted toward the mural again, toward the image of Elara standing beside the prince, toward the silver crest glowing beneath her painted hand, toward the ancient connection that no longer felt accidental. A cold breeze moved through the broken chapel roof. Outside, sunlight filtered through the trees, for the fog beyond the clearing had begun to disappear. Thin rays of gold reached places that had remained hidden all morning. The forest itself seemed different, lighter, alive. Then the prince's fingers moved again, not a twitch, not a deliberate movement, slow, controlled. His hand relaxed against the stone surface. Naomi immediately turned toward him. Sebastian did too. The heartbeat echoed once more, stronger than ever, and as both of them watched, the prince drew a calm breath and slowly turned his head toward the sound of Naomi's voice. The movement was small, barely noticeable, yet inside the ancient chapel it felt louder than thunder. Naomi stared at the prince as his head settled against the stone pillow in a slightly different position than before. No illusion, no misunderstanding. He had moved on purpose. The realization sent a wave of disbelief through her. For 60 years he had remained untouched by time. Now within a single morning everything was changing. The silver leaves covering the roots continued unfolding. Their glow spread across the chapel walls, illuminating carvings that had remained hidden for decades. Outside, sunlight filtered through the forest canopy in long golden beams. The fog that had cloaked the woods all morning was almost gone. Sebastian stepped closer to the stone bed. His expression remained controlled, but Naomi could see the tension in his shoulders. Hope was a dangerous thing for someone who had waited this long. The prince drew another slow breath, then another. Each one sounded stronger than the last. The heartbeat echoed steadily through the sanctuary, no longer fragile, no longer fading, alive. Naomi looked toward the mural where the silver words still shimmered faintly across the stone. The prince chose sleep so the forest could remain awake. The sentence refused to leave her mind. She finally understood that the sleeping prince had never been the victim of the story. He had been its guardian. Somewhere beyond the broken ceiling, a flock of birds suddenly crossed the sky. Their distant calls drifted through the chapel. It was the first birdsong Naomi had heard all day. Sebastian heard it too, his eyes lifted briefly toward the light. "The forest knows," he said quietly. Naomi looked at him. "Knows what?" "That the burden is ending." Before she could ask what burden he meant, a new sound emerged from deep beneath the sanctuary. A low vibration traveled through the floor, not violent, not threatening, ancient. The silver crest beneath Naomi's feet brightened instantly. Light flowed through the carved lines like water through a riverbed. The roots surrounding the prince loosened another inch, then another. The sanctuary itself seemed to exhale. Unfortunately for Naomi, the final piece of the mystery had still not revealed itself. The burden could be shared. The mural had said that. Shared, not removed. Shared. The distinction mattered. She just did not know why yet. Her attention drifted toward the hidden chamber. The crystal-lined box remained open atop the pedestal. Inside, beneath the parchment, something else had appeared. A small object no larger than a silver coin. Naomi frowned. She was certain it had not been there earlier. Slowly she crossed the chamber and lifted it into her palm. The metal felt warm. Strange symbols circled its edge. At the center rested the same crest she had seen throughout the sanctuary. The moment her fingers closed around it, silver light surged across the walls. Every symbol in the hidden chamber illuminated at once. Sebastian immediately turned, his eyes widened. Then, for the first time all day, a voice echoed through the sanctuary, soft, distant, ancient, not spoken aloud, more like a memory awakening from sleep. The keeper does not break the vow, the keeper carries it forward. Naomi froze. The words seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The silver coin warmed further in her hand. Images flashed briefly through her mind. A forest beneath moonlight, a young woman standing beside a prince, two hands joined above a silver crest. Then the vision vanished. Naomi staggered slightly. Sebastian reached out instinctively, but stopped himself before touching her. "What did you see?" he asked. Naomi looked down at the coin resting in her palm. Her heartbeat had quickened, not from fear. Partial understanding, the kind that arrives seconds before a larger truth. Slowly, she looked back toward the prince. The silver light reflected across his face. His breathing remained steady, calm, peaceful. Then, for the first time in 60 years, the prince's eyes began to open. The prince's eyes opened slowly, as though he were returning from a journey longer than most lifetimes. Silver light reflected across his irises. For several seconds, he simply stared upward at the fractured ceiling of the chapel. Dust floated through beams of sunlight. Leaves rustled beyond the broken walls. The world had changed while he slept, yet the first thing he seemed to notice was not the sanctuary around him. It was the sound of birds. A faint smile touched his face. The expression was small, almost fragile, but it transformed him completely. He no longer looked like a figure trapped inside history. He looked alive. Naomi stood frozen beside the hidden chamber, the silver coin still warm in her hand. The heartbeat that had echoed through the sanctuary for hours now sounded steady and normal. Sebastian took a single step forward, then another. For the first time since she had met him, Naomi saw uncertainty in his eyes. Not fear, not doubt, something much deeper. Hope finally becoming real. The prince slowly turned his head. His gaze settled on Sebastian. Neither spoke, neither moved. 60 years of absence stood between them. Then the prince's voice broke the silence. It was quiet from disuse, yet unmistakably clear. "Father." The word seemed to stop time itself. Sebastian closed his eyes briefly. Relief crossed his face before he could hide it. When he opened them again, the weight he had carried for decades appeared lighter somehow. "Welcome back, Elias," he said softly. The prince smiled faintly. "It worked." Naomi frowned. The answer immediately caught her attention. Worked, not survived, not ended. Worked. Elias slowly sat upright as the remaining roots loosened around the stone bed. Silver leaves drifted gently to the floor around him. The sanctuary itself seemed to relax, like a burden carried for too long was finally being released. Unfortunately for Naomi, the most important answer still remained hidden. Elias's attention shifted toward her. The moment their eyes met, recognition appeared in his expression. Not surprise, recognition, as though he had expected her. "The keeper returned," he said quietly. Naomi felt her pulse quicken. "You know who I am?" Elias studied her carefully. "I know who your family was." The silver coin warmed again inside her palm. Elias noticed immediately. His gaze settled on it. Then he nodded. "Good. The vow accepted you." Naomi stepped closer to the stone bed. Questions crowded her mind faster than she could ask them. "Everyone believed you were trapped here." Elias looked around the chapel. His expression remained calm, peaceful. "I was never trapped." Sunlight brightened across the floor. Outside, the forest seemed louder than before. Birds sang from distant branches. Wind moved through the trees. Life had returned to places that had felt frozen only hours earlier. Elias looked toward the mural where the silver words still glowed across the stone. The seal required someone willing to remain connected to it. Naomi remembered the sentence on the wall. The prince chose sleep so the forest could remain awake. Finally she understood. He had not sacrificed 60 years because he was powerless. He had chosen it because no one else could. "You protected all of this," she whispered. Elias smiled, not alone. His gaze shifted toward the mural image of Elara, then toward Naomi. The keepers always shared the burden. The silver coin pulsed once inside her hand. Suddenly the final pieces began falling into place. The vow, the bloodline, the sanctuary choosing her. The burden could be shared, not removed, shared. The realization settled over her with quiet certainty. Her arrival had never been about waking the prince. It had been about allowing him to finally stop carrying the responsibility alone. And as sunlight flooded the chapel for the first time in decades, a new line of silver text slowly appeared across the mural wall behind them. The new line of silver text spread across the mural with the quiet certainty of dawn. Naomi turned toward the glowing words as sunlight continued pouring through the broken roof above. The sanctuary no longer felt ancient and forgotten. It felt awake, alive. The sentence completed itself slowly across the stone. When the burden is shared, the promise becomes freedom. Silence settled over the chapel. Elias read the words without surprise. Sebastian read them with the expression of someone finally reaching the end of a journey that had lasted longer than most human lifetimes. Naomi looked down at the silver coin resting in her palm. Its warmth felt steady now, familiar. The sensation no longer frightened her. Instead, it felt like recognizing a piece of herself she had never known existed. Outside, the forest continued changing. Sunlight reached deeper between the trees. Birds moved through branches that had remained strangely quiet for decades. Even the air smelled different, fresher. The prince slowly stood from the stone bed. His movements were careful but strong. The roots that had surrounded him slipped harmlessly away, settling across the floor like fallen vines after a storm. He looked around the sanctuary with quiet wonder. 60 years had passed, yet his expression carried no bitterness, no regret, only gratitude. "The forest survived," he said softly. Sebastian nodded. "Because of you." Elias smiled faintly. "Because of all of us." His gaze shifted toward Naomi. She understood what he meant. The vow had never belonged to a single person. It had always been shared, passed forward, protected through generations until the moment it could finally be completed. The silver symbols covering the chapel walls began fading one by one, not disappearing, resting, their purpose fulfilled. Naomi stepped closer to the mural. For the first time, she noticed something hidden near the image of Elara, a small inscription carved beneath her figure. The letters shimmered briefly before transforming into words she could read. "Kindness carries what power cannot." Naomi stared at the message. Suddenly everything made sense. The sanctuary had not searched for strength. It had not searched for royalty. It had not searched for someone important. It had waited for someone willing to care, someone willing to listen. Someone willing to step into a forgotten chapel simply because curiosity and compassion had guided her there. Sebastian moved beside her. The sunlight reflected across his pale features. The distance he had carried since the moment they met seemed gone now. "Not completely, but enough. You changed everything," he said quietly. Naomi shook her head. "I think I just showed up at the right time." A rare smile appeared on Sebastian's face, genuine this time. Sometimes that is the same thing. The bell tower above them rang one final time, clear, bright, peaceful, not a warning, not a signal, a farewell. The silver crest beneath Naomi's feet slowly dimmed until only ordinary stone remained. The hidden chamber beyond the mural settled into silence. The ancient vow had been completed, the burden had been shared, the prince was awake, the sanctuary no longer needed guardians standing watch over sleeping promises. It could finally rest. Elias stepped toward the broken entrance and looked out across the forest. Golden sunlight stretched between the trees. For a moment he simply stood there, experiencing a world he had not seen in 60 years. Then he laughed softly at something only he could see. The sound carried through the chapel like music. Naomi smiled. Sebastian did too. And as the last silver light faded from the ancient walls, the forest answered with a warm breeze that moved through the sanctuary for the very first time as a place no longer waiting for tomorrow. 3 days later, the forest looked nothing like the place Naomi had entered that morning. The lingering fog was gone. Sunlight moved freely between the towering pines. Wildflowers had begun appearing along paths that locals swore had remained barren for years. People from nearby towns could not explain the change. They only knew the woods felt different, lighter, warmer, alive. Naomi stood on an old stone bridge crossing a narrow stream near the edge of the sanctuary grounds. Water sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves overhead. For the first time since discovering the hidden chapel, there were no glowing symbols, no mysterious voices, no ancient riddles waiting to be solved. The silence felt peaceful now, complete. She rested her hands on the weathered stone railing and watched the current flow beneath her. Her life had changed in ways she still struggled to understand. Just days earlier, she had been worried about rent payments, delivery schedules, and whether her aging bicycle would survive another winter. Now she knew the truth about her family. She knew that kindness could survive across generations. She knew that some promises were strong enough to outlive time itself. Footsteps approached behind her. Naomi turned. Elias walked across the bridge, carrying a small notebook beneath one arm. The prince looked healthier with every passing day. Color had fully returned to his face. Wonder still appeared in his eyes whenever he encountered something new, which happened often. 60 years had changed the world. Cell phones fascinated him. Coffee amazed him. Traffic lights confused him. Naomi smiled. "Finding your way around?" Elias laughed softly. "I am trying." He looked toward the forest. It feels strange seeing everything move forward again. Naomi followed his gaze. Do you regret it? Elias thought for a moment, then he shook his head. No, his answer came without hesitation. I would make the same choice. The certainty in his voice carried no sadness, only peace. A few moments later, another figure appeared at the far end of the bridge. Sebastian walked toward them beneath the golden afternoon light. There was something different about him now. The weight that had shadowed his expression since the moment Naomi met him was finally gone. The years of waiting had ended. The years of hoping had ended. His son was awake. The vow was complete. When he reached them, none of the three spoke immediately. They simply stood together, listening to the water below and the wind moving through the trees. Sometimes silence carried more meaning than words. Eventually, Elias excused himself and continued toward the forest trail. He paused briefly before leaving. Thank you, Naomi, she smiled. For what? Elias looked back toward the distant sanctuary hidden among the trees. For arriving exactly when you did. Then he disappeared down the path. Naomi watched him go. Beside her, Sebastian rested his hands against the bridge railing. The afternoon sun reflected across the stream below. He is right, he said quietly. Naomi laughed. I still think I got lost. A rare smile appeared on Sebastian's face, perhaps. For a while neither spoke. Then Naomi looked toward the horizon where sunlight painted the forest gold. What happened? Sebastian followed her gaze. The answer came easily. Now we live. The simplicity of it made her smile. No ancient burden, no unfinished vow, no destiny waiting around the next corner. Just tomorrow, just possibility. Together they stood on the bridge as sunlight filled the valley. Birds crossed the open sky overhead. The forest that had once guarded a sleeping prince now welcomed a new future. And where the story had begun with a young woman riding alone through cold mist and uncertainty, it ended with Naomi no longer standing alone beneath the light.